Hello everyone, this is part 36 of What If Naruto and Hinata trained together and a spark happened, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Hinata froze, turning her head towards the cave. She leaned forward on the branch, her eyes narrowing as her Kekkei Genkai penetrated the stone and dirt below them. Naruto stared at his fiancée curiously, but Sakura kept her focus on the forest, only sparing brief glances at her teammates. What is it? The pink-haired medic asked softly. I see movement in the crypt, at the edge of my visual range, the mission leader reported. What kind of movement? Naruto queried nervously. 5 human shapes. I'm having a hard time tracking them, Hinata told him. It seems like they're using a ninjutsu to hide themselves. Or they're just invisible and intangible, the lone male shuddered. Sakura grimaced, but did not say anything, mainly because she was not sure she could keep from yelling at him if she opened her mouth. Hinata simply shook her head. I can see their skeletons, the pale beauty explained, though that did not improve Naruto's disposition. It appears their technique diverts light away from their skin and clothes. If I push past, I can see bones and chakra networks. But when I try to look at their faces, I see an outline, like the thieves described. I thought those guys said it was a genjutsu. Uzumaki was still not convinced. Those second-rate bandits couldn't tell a ninjutsu from a genjutsu, from a sleight of hand magic trick, Sakura scoffed. Look at how badly they used the chameleon tarps. They probably just assumed it was a mental technique. Shush. Hinata hissed gently, they are moving this way. The big one is carrying a sealed scroll box. See, they can't be ghosts, Sakura whispered triumphantly, otherwise, they could just look through the box at what the scrolls say. Unless they need it for something else, Naruto said dubiously. Before they could continue their argument, Hinata frowned and lowered her chin, pursing her full lips thoughtfully. What is it, Hinata? The blonde Tokujo prompted his beloved. They seem familiar, she told him. I'm pretty sure I haven't seen them before, but I think I have heard or read about a group like this. 3 guys of average build, 1 larger male, and 1 woman, Sakura pondered it. 2 of the average men have identical skeletons, Hinata informed them in a tense whisper. I would say that they are twins. Now quiet, they are almost here. Sakura considered Hinata's words, agreeing something about the description triggered her memory, however she too was not sure why. Hinata considered her tactical options, to attack them, or to let them go and follow. If we are going to attack, we need to hit them before they exit the cave, the appointed leader mulled over the 2 options. That way, the narrow tunnel will help to make sure that none of them slip past us and escape. Unless there is another entrance further down. In that case, attacking them now would put the tomb at risk, but they could still get away. And I didn't see these shadows enter, so I cannot discount the possibility that there is another exit. Also, this group is obviously far better trained than the last rogues, so they will be harder to capture and less likely to break under interrogation. Hinata signaled her teammates to move away from the cave and close ranks. We follow them, she signed to her friends, and Sakura nodded back. Hinata took a deep breath, hoping she had made the right choice. Naruto noticed her expression, and gave her an encouraging grin and a thumbs up. A few minutes later, the shadowy thieves emerged from the hole, and it was a tight fit for the largest one. For a moment they stood there, as if waiting for orders. Then, in unison, they started running due west. They quickly took to the trees, hopping rapidly from branch to branch. These ones are definitely ninjas, Hinata thought to herself, as the leaf trio began to follow. Team Kakashi stayed well back, counting on Hinata's Byakugan to track the rogues. The Tokujo kept them over 100 meters back, and on a lower set of branches. But the distance was not enough, for after 12 minutes of pursuit, the thief in the lead signaled, and the group began to move faster, diverting slightly to the south. They detected us, Hinata picked up speed in kind, abandoning the pretense of stealth. How? It's not like they can see us back here, right? Sakura asked, glancing to her right at Naruto. Did we mess up somehow? I didn't do anything, Uzumaki complained. Hinata divided her attention, keeping the renegades in her sights, while focusing more closely on their surroundings. Then she saw it. Sakura brushed up against a spiderweb, one of dozens in their path. But this silk mesh glimmered slightly with chakra as it fell away. The spiderwebs, the Hyuga heiress told her teammates, they are using some sort of ninjutsu to turn the webs into alarms. It is almost too subtle for me to see with my normal Byakugan. In response to the assertion, she added more energy to her white eyes, turning them silver. Great, how do we avoid spiderwebs in a forest? The pink-haired Kunoichi groused. We don't, Hinata answered, if they know we are here, they might try to split up, or lead us into a trap. So we have to take them, now. The suggestion was not so easy to complete. The five shadows stayed well ahead of Team Kakashi, to the point where Naruto and Sakura were straining to keep up. As the fastest member of the group, Hinata expected she could catch the thieves if she went ahead. But she estimated their opponents were at least Chunin rank, and fighting them 5-on-1 was not a sound tactical decision. What? Now? Sakura asked as she exhaled, controlling her breathing to help regulate her speed. There is a cliff up ahead, Hinata recalled, and at the bottom, a break in the forest. Assuming they don't have a trap set there, when we reach that spot, I will catch up to them, and Naruto can use his clones to do the same. The two of us will cut them off, and Sakura, you can come up behind them, so we will have them surrounded. You think this is a trap? Naruto prompted. They changed directions, Sakura said sharply, no longer monitoring her words, so they obviously are no longer heading back to their base. They may just be taking us on a wild goose chase, Hinata admitted dubiously, but more likely they have friends waiting to ambush us, or snares or seals set up to stop pursuers. After just over a mile of chasing, Hinata signaled their approach to the target. Seconds after that, Naruto and Sakura could making out the edge of the tree line, and the abrupt drop in the earth below. By the time they reached the edge, the thieves were already sliding down, using their chakra to partially adhere to the wall, and letting gravity do the rest. The leaf ninjas did not take such a leisurely approach. With instincts honed by training, they sent chakra out their feet and ran down the rock face as if it were horizontal instead of nearly vertical. This let them cut into the rogue's lead, but the robbers still hit the ground first. And then Hinata saw why they had been allowed to catch up. Two new figures emerged from the woods opposite the cliff. Not him, Hinata whispered anxiously, forcing herself not to look at her other two teammates. As the five thieves drew closer, they allowed their ninjutsu to fall. Naruto and Sakura had not yet noticed the two newcomers, but they recognized the grave robbers as soon as the veil faded. The woman might have been attractive, had her face not been overwhelmed by the dark, crazed look in her hazel eyes. She had scarlet hair running just past her shoulders, with a single lock running between her eyes from under her hat, and a full, fit figure, if not quite so curvaceous as Naruto's beloved. She carried the flute in her right hand almost like a club. The big one set down the box before the new arrivals. He had 3 lines of bright orange hair, one down the center of his head, and one over each ear. He was quite fat, larger even than Choji, but had powerful arms and legs. The third thief initially appeared nondescript, with a plain face and black hair in a top knot. But then he ended his transformation jutsu, and his 2 arms split back into the 6 he naturally possessed. The twins had short gray hair, covering one of their eyes. The one with the right eye covered looked hopeful, while the twin with his left eye hidden looked anxious. They both wore deep blue lip gloss, their preferred shade having been discontinued over 2 years ago. The Sound 4 looked almost the same as they had when they had taken Sasuke, except that now their skin held an odd, gray tint. They all wore identical new outfits, thick, long-sleeved tan shirts, tied up the sides, and loose brown hakama. No way, we killed those guys 4 years ago, Naruto exclaimed, failing to notice the shinobi that the Sound Ninja 4 were meeting. Why don't you try thinking for once, idiot? The voice of Sasuke Uchiha echoed off the rock face, before shifting into the softer, darker tones. Orochimaru, I have made improvements to the impure world resurrection to make those it brings back disconnected from my chakra. Unfortunately, this makes them more difficult to control. So rather than try, I simply brought back my most loyal and talented followers. He had grown, though he was still not as tall as Naruto. In the 17 months since they had fought together against the vampire demon, Sasuke Uchiha had added almost another inch of height to his frame, though he was still of a slender build. His formerly wild hair was longer, and was pulled into a tight ponytail, reflecting the style the new soul that controlled his body. His eyes were locked in Sharingan mode, but their pupils were now a snake-like vertical slit. Instead of the open front, white shirt, black pants and blue cloak tied around his waist, he now wore a tan tabard over a black bodysuit and a thick red obi, tied in complex knots. Behind him stood another man. Possessed of stark white hair despite being in his early 20s, Kabuto Yakushi's sharp black eyes cautiously regarded the leaf ninjas through his narrow glasses, particularly focusing on Naruto. Hinata instantly realized that Kabuto had two arms again, though the left side of his face was mildly scarred and that ear was still missing. He was also without a headband. For the first time, neither a leaf nor a note covered his forehead. Orochimaru, Naruto roared. He created a clone, having it throw him forward to increase his speed. Sasuke's face smiled smugly, and his servants split off. Saken and Akon did not merge together as they were wont to do, but instead spread further apart, causing the two women some concern. Kabuto charged for Hinata, his kicks driving her back towards the cliff. Tayuya, Kidomaru, and Jirobo all raced towards Sakura, corralling the medic away from both of her teammates. The twins reached their assigned places, and each summoned a large scroll. They rolled out the parchment-like small tatami mats, and each sat cross-legged in the middle. They activated the jutsu in the scrolls, and a wall of red energy sprang up. Unlike the version of the Shishinjin that had trapped the Orochimaru with the third Hokage, these seals had been prepared in advance and used the natural barrier of the cliff to aid them. As a result, each of them was able to create their own box, Saken trapping Hinata with Kabuto, and Akon trapping Sakura with his remaining three teammates. Why are you doing this? Naruto demanded, stopping short as the overlapping barriers separated the members of Team Kakashi. I needed some new test subjects, for all of the fascinating new techniques I have been acquiring, the serpent answered, using Sasuke's voice, so I dropped some bait for the Leaf Village. And look what I caught. And the barriers, Uzumaki snarled, drawing Kitsune. They make things easier, they keep you three from working together. And once Kabuto disables Hinata, he can help the other three knock out Sakura. Then, if you are still standing, it will become 7-on-1. Don't underestimate Hinata, the former Jinchuriki warned dangerously, or me either. I took down Madara Uchiha. So I heard, Orochimaru smirked, but what you don't seem to realize is that I had been fighting Madara just before you arrived. He wasn't even at 50% when you took him down. Nice try, but I'm not going to fall for that, Naruto shot back, but not as confidently. You looked completely absurd, in your swimsuit and a stolen lab coat that was one size too large. The Tomo in Sasuke's eyes spun faster. Well, even if you were there, you ran and I finished Madara. Naruto did not back down. I wasn't exactly at full power back then, either. And I've gotten stronger since then. And I have spent the last 4 months collecting ancient jutsu and further improving Sasuke's body. Orochimaru looked excited, so let's see how you compare to that. In fact, I have the perfect place to start. Me, Tori. Oh no you don't, Naruto shouted, darting forward. But Sasuke's Sharingan tracked his movements easily, and Orochimaru avoided him without stopping or slowing his rapid string of hand signs. Me, Tatsu, the serpent finished forming the technique, heretic art, 5 souls underworld connection. A cloud of dark, cold energy surrounded Naruto. The teen shuddered as the mist separated from him, leaving a feeling that he had been touched by the Reaper. The jutsu settled between Naruto and Orochimaru, and the fog split into 5 distinct masses, each slowly taking on human form. Sakura knew these opponents fairly well. She had read and reread the mission reports for the failed attempt to retrieve Sasuke. Until the words were seared into her brain. Jirobo used his great physical strength in melee combat, backed up by earth element jutsus. Kidomaru was a mid-range fighter, using his threads to trap opponents, and to form arrows and knives to attack ensnared foes. He also had a spider summoning contract, which he sometimes used to augment his own webs. And Tayuya used the sound of her flute summon and control low-level demons, and to weave genjutsu around her enemies. The Leaf Medic was not sure if they retained the cursed marks after being raised from the dead, but she hoped the two techniques were not compatible. Jirobo barreled forward, swinging both hands together in an overhead hammer strike. Sakura caught both of his hands on her left wrist. The larger shinobi's attack was stopped, but the stone under the kunoiki's feet cracked, and her feet sunk in by half an inch. Haruno pulled back her right arm to counter, not particularly impressed by the undead warrior's strength. But a mass of fluid struck her, pinning her upper arm against her ribs as it solidified. Jirobo lashed out again, and this time connected, knocking Sakura perilously close to the deadly barrier. Hey, guys, isn't that the whiny? Tayuya trailed off, and her eyes flickered over to where Orochimaru was dodging Naruto's heedless rush. Wench, that was hanging all over Sasuke. Sakura Haruno, Kidomaru confirmed, lifting a spike to throw at the young woman, but don't underestimate her too much, she has been training with one of the Sannin, if the weakest of the three. He aimed the spear for her other shoulder, but Sakura caught it with a snarl. Don't you talk about Lady Tsunade, she barked, closing her fist tight, snapping the barb in half. Then she casually flexed her right arm, breaking apart the hardened webbing. She started to step forward, however Jirobo had completed his technique. Doton, Doro Dome, he proclaimed, and a hemisphere of stone formed around the slender kunoiki. I don't see what you're so worried about, Kidomaru, the fat shinobi chuckled, I've got this. She's lunch. His statement trailed off in confusion as the front of the dome exploded outwards, peppering the two closer warriors with chunks of stone. Sakura sprang forward, unconcerned, and her right fist met the still stunned Jirobo's face. She was mildly surprised that she did not feel his jaw break under her fingers, but he still rocketed away, striking his spidery ally at high speed. The two resurrected ninjas rolled briefly from the force of her attack, but when they stood, they appeared totally unharmed. Are you going to do something? Kidomaru grumbled at Tayuya, even as he spat two more spheres of webbing at the pink-haired medic's legs. The leaf shinobi dodged the first, and was hit by the second, her left foot glued to the stone. The taut muscles in her thigh were briefly highlighted as she stained, breaking the adhesive again. We don't exactly have room for me to summon my ogres, Tayuya answered slowly, carefully watching her language while in Orochimaru's presence, and I don't think they'd do any better against that brute than Jirobo is. Then use an illusion, or get in there and help him, Kidomaru began signing as he said it. Don't give me orders, bug boy, she shot back, but raised her flute to her lips nevertheless. A soft, sweet melody drifted from the instrument, and Sakura's eyes grew heavy. She shook out her head, and pressed her hands together, shouting, release. Though the effect of the genjutsu was quickly removed, it gave Tayuya's teammates the opening they wanted. The medic's head cleared, just in time for her to recognize Jirobo's fist shooting towards her midsection and Kidomaru's webs closing behind her. Without time to dodge or properly brace herself, Sakura could only cross her arms in front of her body, sending some extra chakra to her limbs to reinforce them. She was lifted into the air and pain spread through her wrists. She would have flown into the deadly wall of scarlet flames, had the sticky mesh not caught and held her. She remembered Orochimaru stating he wanted test subjects, and knew they could not kill her, though the realization gave her little comfort. She tore free from the net, leaving bits of the back of her shirt and socks behind. Jirobo ran forward to meet her, but Sakura was already signing as she drove her fist into the ground. Doton, epicenter jutsu, she proclaimed, and the dirt and stone bucked out from her hand. The fat warrior was caught by the technique, and knocked backwards, but his teammates had the advantage of distance and mobility, and jumped over the shock wave. But the quick-witted young woman had anticipated that, and Kidomaru found himself in the midst of a barrage of shurikens. While the rotund warrior regained his feet, the spidery shinobi extracted the throwing stars from his wounds, tossing them casually into the flaming barrier. As her weapons were melted in a flash, Sakura noticed the Kidomaru's injuries did not bleed, and closed as soon as the shurikens were removed. Tayuya's flute twittered again, and Sakura's balance felt off as her perception of time shifted. Jirobo charged her again, and he seemed to her to be both faster and higher pitched than before. His fist aimed for her face, and she was unable to dodge. She tried to block, but her body did not respond like she wanted. She partially interjected her left hand, but only the last two fingers on the limb intercepted his punch, and they were painfully bent out of the way. Only mildly deflected, Jirobo's fist impacted her right cheek almost squarely, and drove her to the ground. As she fell, the Jonin had the presence of mind to bring her palms together again, and intoned, release. Time and her body returned to normal, and she was able to twist to the side and mostly avoid the trap Kidomaru had set for her. She pushed away, leaving more of her shirt behind and some of her flesh as well. Jirobo grinned as he caught a glimpse of her armored brassiere. Sakura ignored the leering, and repaired her broken fingers and stripped flesh as she slid around Jirobo's next attack. With her wounds no longer interfering, though not fully healed, Haruno darted towards Kidomaru. The spider quickly formed two kunai to throw, trying to keep her away, but she deflected them. Jirobo closed in on her from behind, however she was not surprised, and caught his jaw with a back heel kick, returning the favor of crashing to the dirt. What are you doing, you fat, stupid oaf? Tayuya shouted at her larger teammate, why didn't you knock her out? Stuff it, Tayuya, he grunted angrily, I have to hold back, since I can't kill her. And she's tougher than she looks. Fine, I'll play a new song for her, the Sound Force foul-mouthed second commanded, while she's under, grab her arms so she can't escape the genjutsu. Hold her arms as tight as you can, even if you have to break them. Lord Orochimaru won't mind, Kabuto can fix that easily enough. Then Kidomaru can spray her down with so much goop she won't be able to move, and I'll weave a few more illusions around her to keep her docile. Neither of her allies looked happy about being ordered around, but both moved to comply. As another melody emerged from the instrument, Kidomaru continued his retreat from Sakura while building up a larger volume of saliva in his mouth. Jirobo began to move in again, but this time more cautiously. Sakura shook her head, placing her hands together, and jumped sideways and backwards, escaping the immediate threat posed by the overweight stalker. Kidomaru spit a narrow stream of fluid at her, but she avoided it without unwrapping her fingers. Do you really expect me to fall for your plan after you just announce it like that? Tsunad's apprentice asked scornfully, and then tried to bait them, maybe you should use your cursed marks. We don't have them anymore, Kidomaru admitted freely, unconcerned, not that we need them. These new bodies are almost as strong as the level 2 release, and never grow tired. And as for your knowing our plans. Something wrapped around Sakura's right arm, and she glanced down. Kidomaru's thread was wrapped around it, and as she followed it back, Jirobo was wielding the spider's silk cord like a whip. He began pulling her in, exhibiting greater strength than he had before. The six-armed shinobi created another clinging whip for himself, and wrapped this one around the leaf kunoiki's neck. At the same time a thick, cold fog started to form around her. Release, Sakura shouted, but nothing changed. She shivered as the water vapor began to freeze to her skin. She tried to escape, but due to their positioning could not. She tried to pull the weaker Kidomaru in, but he dug in with spikes in his other forearms, giving him a stronger base. What you heard wasn't the game plan, Tayuya called out. Kidomaru mocked her, part of the advantage of multiplayer. The medic tried to grab the rope, to snap it, but Jirobo limited the movement of her right arm and Kidomaru cracked the whip, keeping her from catching the cord. The pink-haired woman felt her eyes closing in spite of herself, due to the cold and her partially constricted airway. Sakura, she heard Hinata shout, followed by two loud pops. Help Sakura, Hinata ordered, before dodging back away from the barrier. Sakura tried to look back, but could not. Then there was a deep yelp from the fat man, and his lasso went slack. With her arm free, she was able to latch onto the other silk cord and snap it. She darted back out of Tayuya's freezing song, having vaguely figured out that the ninjutsu had a limited, unmoving area, which was why the other two had held her in place. Recovering from the cold, she glanced over, and saw the familiar forms of Sol and Lune scampering over to her, and wide cuts in Jirobo's legs closing. Thank you, Sakura panted slightly, as the Sound 4 regrouped. Unheard, the Jonan's inner voice berated herself, I need to get Tsunade or Kakashi to teach me to summon something. Of course, Miss Sakura, Sol nodded her head, her right eye still regarding the renegades. Jirobo and Kidomaru watched them carefully, but the foul-mouthed female just grinned and shook her head. That third-rate wallflower must be a complete moron, she mocked, she should be worrying about herself, and instead she wastes time and chakra to summon a bunch of stupid, oversized rats in here. Lune's blue eyes widened, and he took a step away from his sister. As the albino squirrel's fur began to stand on end, Sakura followed his example. The younger squirrel turned towards the heckler, and her red eyes seemed to glow from within. What did you say? Sol howled in a monstrous voice, but threw herself at Tayuya before the human could respond. The sound ninja's hazel eyes widened in surprise, and she barely brought her flute up in time to block the rodent's fierce swing with her shortsword. Even though the instrument was made of weapons-grade steel and chakra-hardened, Sol's blade still put a nick in it. The squirrel drew a second blade from her sash, and dropped down lower, skipping past Tayuya and screaming triumphantly as she scored deep cuts in the woman's stomach. The undead kunoichi healed quickly and did not feel pain, but instinctively grimaced from the attack. I always told her, her mouth would get her in trouble, Kidomaru said dumbly, too shocked by what was happening to react further. Both revived renegades just watched in amazement as Sol darted back and forth past Tayuya, landing repeated cuts on the human. Jirobo nodded slowly. What just happened? Sakura asked Lune cautiously, wondering if she had underestimated Hinata's summoning contract. My sister has 2 berserker buttons, the black-furred rodent answered, insulting Hinata, and insulting the ninja squirrel clan. That person just managed to hit both buttons in one sentence. He sighed, and tightened his grip on his own weapon. I better get in there. Sol will come to her senses in about 30 seconds, and then she'll be the one in trouble. Can you handle the other 2? Sakura shivered from the residual cold, but bobbed her head, stating, I think so, yes. As the leaf ninja watched, Tayuya recovered from her shock, and was starting to hold her own against the rabid squirrel. She drew a dagger in her left hand, and continued to use her flute like a rod. As the human started to gain ground, the second summoned rodent hit her. Unlike his out-of-control sister, Lune hit the flute player carefully and deliberately, slicing through her left hamstring while she was focused on the albino squirrel. Tayuya's leg crumpled briefly, but the normally crippling attack vanished almost instantly, and the sound ninja glanced back at the new attacker balefully. As much as she wanted to spring out and strike at Kidomaru and Jirobo while they were distracted, Sakura recognized that their physical attacks so far had not hurt the sound immediately or cumulatively. She knew she would have to try something else. Neither my fire or lightning techniques are particularly advanced, she reminded herself, and air and earth jutsus are just more physical damage. Or maybe physical attacks could work, if they are strong enough. These guys can ignore normal cuts, but what about dismemberment, or acid? Are you going to give up? Kidomaru asked, recovering his focus when he noticed her pensive observation of the 2 resurrected men. Not hardly, Haruno snapped. I've spent the last 4 years wondering what would have happened if I had gone after your guys with Shikamaru's squad. Could I have helped them beat you, sparing my friend some pain? Could I have stood with Naruto against Sasuke, and convinced him to come back? Or would I have just been in the way? The medic tugged on her gloves, and met both of their eyes unflinchingly, but now it's my turn. I'm not the tagalong girl I was back then. I have trained with the strongest woman in the world. I'm a Jonin. I defeated Sasori of the Red Sand. And I'm going to make you pay for breaking up our team and hurting my friends. The only hesitation you saw, Sakura declared confidently, was me trying to decide how to kill you. The medic thought of one more thing she wanted to try. She closed her fingers tightly, and lightning began to crackle around them. This was her own technique, the Ranshinsho upgraded with elements of the Chidori to not only disrupt an opponent's nervous system, but also deliver severe electrical burns. Assuming those guys still run on neuro-electrical energy, Ina Sakura reminded her main personality. Neither of the now younger men appeared impressed by her speech. Sakura sent a spike of chakra into her legs, instinctively enhancing her strength. Tsunde's technique was not so useful for distance running, but it was great for covering short distances with single bound, and the teen healer crossed the space between herself and Jirobo before the fat ninja could prepare himself. She exhaled loudly, and drove her fist into his throat. Kidomaru blinked, and fired a trio of silken spikes at her, but Sakura was already moving away as Strongman rocketed back, gagging pitiably. And? The medic asked silently, watching the fallen shinobi carefully, even as she dropped beneath the spider's newly launched net, and slid forward to get out from under it. Though his fingers and toes twitched erratically, Jirobo was able to sit up, still coughing. He rose unsteadily to his feet, and the charred hand print in his throat was visibly fading, though nowhere near as quickly as his other wounds. He raised his right arm slowly, and it jerked once at the elbow. As he swung it around, the random movements in his fingers stopped. Neither success not failure, she reported to herself, so I'll try the other. She caught another saliva silk spike, and snapped it, while dodging two more. Jirobo started to rumble towards her, but Sakura had already retrieved her weapon scroll, and reached into it. The big man hesitated as she drew forth her heavy, wickedly sharp axe. Both of her opponents stopped, watching her carefully. I know, she nodded, her grin dark. Getting slashed by a kunai or stabbed with a shuriken is one thing. But how will those corpse-like bodies of yours deal with dismemberment? Or beheading? Severed limbs can be reattached, Kidomaru said, trying to hide his uncertainty, not that we will give you the chance to see it. He built up his silk until it had formed two extra large scimitars. Either one of the curved blades would have been too heavy for an average ninja to use, even with two hands, but as the spider passed them to his bulky comrade, Jirobo caught one in each hand, and swung them around effortlessly. After creating the blades, Kidomaru created a pair of bows for himself. He used two hands to hold each bow, and spit an arrow into each of his open palms, drawing them back and watching for his opening. Jirobo's bulk blocked Sakura's slender form, but their plan called for him to maneuver her into his teammate's line of fire and tie up her arms so she couldn't block. As Sol calmed down, she found herself slightly out of breath, and glad that her brother was there to pick up the slack. Lune knew he could not match most humans in strength, so he focused on his speed, and on crippling shots on Tayuya's legs and lower body. Normally, it would have been an effective strategy, but the crimson-haired rogue had not suffered the expected loss of mobility. Instead, as Sol fell back, panting, Tayuya began only half-heartedly blocking Lune's attacks with her left hand, and again lifted her flute to her lips. Though the instrument was not designed for one-handed playing, she was still able to form enough of a tune to shape her chakra into a new jutsu. Demonic howls filled the valley, echoing from outside the wall of flames. Demonic wolves, each looking like nothing so much as an artist's interpretation of a hunt spirit, stalked through the barrier towards the rodent ninjas. Lune's tail flicked in worry, unsure if this was an illusion or some sort of summoning. Futon. Sol returned her swords to her sash, and began to slowly gather her energy. She had made it a point to work on her wind techniques since the incident with the two-tails cat. For wind scattering, she completed the jutsu, launching what appeared to be a ball of wind at Tayuya. The air instantly burst away from the human's head, leaving her in a vacuum. The sound from the flute vanished, as did the illusionary predators. Nice try, little rat, Tayuya mouthed, but without air to carry it, no sound emerged. Both squirrels read her lips as she continued, but I don't have to breath anymore. But you can't play anymore either, Sol counted tiredly, backing away from the human while keeping her forepaws together to maintain the ninjutsu, and from what I saw, both when we arrived and just now, you use your flute for most of your techniques, don't you? Tayuya couldn't hear the response, and had difficulty reading the rodent's lips, but she appeared to have gotten the message. She tried to charge the younger summoned animal, but Lune intercepted her, tripping her with his sword and tail. Tayuya quickly turned over, and lashed out with her right hand, catching the male squirrel in the chest with her reinforced woodwind. No match for her strength, Lune sailed briefly, and then rolled along the ground, managing to stop himself perilously close to the deadly enclosure. He pulled himself back up carefully, in obvious pain. The warrior rodent took a deliberate, disciplined breath, and tightened his sash around his cracked ribs. He noticed Tayuya getting close to his sister, and darted back into the fray. Sakura Haruno was not stupid. Out of the ninjas in the Hidden Leaf Village, she was easily in the top 10% for intellect. So she was quite aware that Jirobo was carefully trying to make her move out from behind him. Though she knew they were not allowed to kill her, she expected taking Kidomaru's rough arrows in the knees or ankles would take her out of the fight without endangering her life. And while Jirobo was not stronger than her, he was able to put everything he had into every strike, and it was beginning to wear on her. The scimitars were sturdier than she had expected, and the fat man wielded his twin blades with practiced skill. As a result, she had not had an opportunity to make good on her earlier threat. Any time she attempted a counter-attack, Jirobo would block with one of his swords, while stabbing at her with the other. Okay, that's just stupid, Sakura murmured aloud. As she dodged a strike at her torso, a ludicrous yet familiar plan formed in her mind. Naruto level stupid, she continued internally, so it just might work. She allowed Jirobo to guide her, listening carefully to the creaking of Kidomaru's bows. Then she quickly hopped further to the side, putting herself between the spider and the big man. As she expected, Jirobo stepped back and away from her, giving his ally an opening. But as Kidomaru unleashed the first miniature javelin, she was already turning. She flung her axe sidearm, deflecting the arrow mid-flight. Kidomaru's eyes widened, and he loosed the second projectile before bringing up his bows to guard his body. The ranged weapons were not as tough as the swords he had made, and both splintered, though they were still able to deviate the heavy weapon harmlessly over his head. The mistimed second arrow struck Sakura in the abdomen. As it did, she disappeared in a puff of smoke, and the bolt shattered on the steel head of her axe. Subsution. Kidomaru croaked in surprise, and started to whirl around. Weapon summoning jutsu, Sakura yelled from behind him, and the axe returned to her hands as it fell. She swung it down with all of her considerable strength. The massive blade sheared through Kidomaru's first two left shoulders as he started to dive away, which was the only thing that allowed him to keep his bottom left arm. Kidomaru skidded to a halt, trying to glare hatefully at her, but too caught up in fear to be successful. Neither wound bled, and his insides looked more like an expensive anatomy model than living tissue. His severed arms flopped briefly, but ultimately just lay still on the rocky ground. Sakura wanted to observe them, but her attention was ripped away. Back off, jerks, a distinctly feminine voice ordered from outside the Shishinjin, and everyone in both enclosures paused to look. Though Sakura did not recognize the voice, she felt the phrasing and intonation were a dead ringer for Naruto. She could barely make out two figures standing defensively in front of Naruto. One was completely hidden between the flames and Naruto's body, but the other looked like a woman with long cyan hair and a snow-white shozaku. "We won't let you lay one finger on our son," the other figure agreed. "No way," the pink-haired kunoichi heard Hinata gasp in amazement. "Sol, isn't that?" Lune's voice trailed off in awe, and his sister nodded. Though she was curious, Tsunde's apprentice was not about to let the advantage pass again. She swung her axe horizontally at Kidomaru's throat. The arachnid impersonator recognized the flashing metal an instant too late, and the steel cleaved halfway through his neck. With a grimace, one of his hands reached up, and pushed his head back down. The skin and bone began to seal immediately, but Sakura did not fail to notice that his missing arms had not changed on either side. "It's not regeneration," the medic decided, "it is more like mechanical repair." Jirobo leaped past his main teammate's head, scissoring his scimitars towards her left shoulder. Sakura interposed her blade, and this time the hardened silk blade in his right hand cracked on the axe. He did not react to the damage, instead he quickly reversed his intact weapon, angling it towards her right side. Sakura had to step back and drop the hilt of her axe to block, lest she be disemboweled. This was what he wanted. Her movement allowed him to hook his foot under the closer of Kidomaru's severed limbs, and kick it back towards his ally. The spider caught the arm, and pressed it to his shoulder, and the appendage started to reconnect to his body. "I was afraid of that," Sakura frowned, "but I'm not too surprised. Still there has to be some way to use this weakness." She sliced through the thread Kidomaru sent towards his remaining arm, not wanting to lose her last specimen, as she considered the problem. Hinata's silver eyes told her that the barrier containing her and Kabuto was much larger than the one trapping Sakura with the remaining Sound Force shinobi. She doubted it was a mistake on the part of Sakanora-kon. She decided it must be deliberate. What she was not sure of, was why Kabuto was given more room than his three juniors. Since the barrier had ascended, Hinata had not made an aggressive moves. Yakushi had thrown some kunai at her, to test her focus, but she simply blocked the knives without changing her expression, or her careful observation of him. Her behavior had started to grate on the renegade medic, and when he noticed her glancing at his replacement limb, he thought he understood her interest. "Why are you looking at me like that?" Kabuto asked angrily. "Is it the new arm?" "It doesn't look like a graft," Hinata noted warily. "Your skin and even bones are unmarked, as if you had never replaced your arm in the first place. I'm not a medical expert, but I would not have thought that was possible, especially since Naruto reported you cauterized the wound so you could escape. This might not be possible for medical shinobi bound by the restrictions the leaf imposes," he agreed, "but between my medical jutsu, and Orochimaru's necromantic skills, we were able to regenerate my arm." "You used Naruto's blood, didn't you?" she prompted dangerously, thinking she recognized a lingering aura around the appendage. He left enough of it on my clothes. Kabuto tried to pretend her insight did not rattle him, but that was only a small part of the overall jutsu. He formed a set of chakra scalpels in his left hand, to show that the arm was fully functional. He darted towards Hinata, swinging horizontally with the 3 surgical blades, but she avoided him easily. He stabbed and slashed with speed and precision, and still she fluidly slid around his attacks. The Hyuga heiress hopped back, still watching him as she had before, to his continued annoyance. She continued to dodge his strikes without countering, while still studying his face with her silver eyes. As he started to prepare a water jutsu, Hinata suddenly spoke. "Why did you do it?" she asked softly, as if afraid of the answer. "Do what? Betray the leaf?" He stopped, confused. "No, I know that your loyalty was never with us." She shook her head, and placed her right hand over her left be protectively. "Why did you help me?" Understanding dawned on him, and he smiled darkly. "You were already a wanted traitor, and you were preparing to invade the Konohagakure," she continued quickly, "so why would you take the time to help one injured girl, when your plans should have killed her anyway?" "You weren't just injured," he informed her smugly, "you were dying. If I hadn't interceded, you would have been dead in a week, 10 days at most, invasion or not." "Why?" Tears of frustration formed around the bottom of her still metallic eyes. "I don't think it was compassion, not after everything I've seen and heard of you. Was it some part of your plans? Were you going to use me in some way?" "Don't flatter yourself," he barked a laugh. "What possible use could we have had for you? You're a third-rate ninja, and your father favors your sister. Was it for your experiments?" She pressed. "Last year, you told Naruto you wanted to study my eyes." "That was a spur-of-the-moment impulse," he shrugged. "Then why?" she demanded. Though her outburst amused him, a small part of him was also unsettled. "The truth," he said seriously, his eyes hidden by the sheen of his glasses, "it was for my pride. There you were, the first daughter of the vaunted Hyuga clan. And even though the best and brightest of the Leaf Ninja Medical Corps had had over a month to fix you up, all they could do was delay the inevitable. And in 5 minutes, I was able to diagnose and repair the damage Neji did to your heart. I wanted to show them how weak and ineffectual they were. I helped you, to prove that I was superior. That's all." Hinata was not sure how to react. For all her fears and worries, in the end she was just an incidental pawn in Kabuto's boasting. The pale beauty felt relief, anger, and sadness, all at once. Instead she just smiled at him and nodded. "Thank you for telling me," she said earnestly. Then her face turned stern, the hesitation drained away and her silver eyes narrowed. "Shall we continue?" she asked. She dropped into her fighting stance, and darted forward, slipping past his waiting blades, and tagging his left hip. She continued past him, and drove her gentle fist-laced fingers into his back, just above his right kidney. Pain flooded his lower back, but Kabuto ignored it as turned to face her. Before he could attack again, Hinata hit his right arm, disrupting the chakra scalpels he was maintaining. "She's fast," he thought anxiously, maybe even faster than Orochimaru is now. Kabuto dropped low, and aimed a heel kick at her knee. As he hoped, she jumped back, giving him the time he needed. "Inu, Tatsu," he signed quickly, knowing he had only bought himself a few heartbeats. "Medical art, key line jutsu." He brought his left hand to his left hip, back, and right wrist, restoring the damage Hinata had done to his chakra network. While the young woman recovered from the dodge, she observed the technique. It was not as quick as the chakra pulse, and required him to manually restore each individual tenketsu, instead of just fixing the entire network. But it also required less energy to use. Kabuto did not wait, but began signing again, as he had before she interrupted him with her queries. "Ushi, Uma, Hitsuji, Ushi, I, Suten, fire hose jutsu," he intoned, firing the dense column of water at Hinata. As the liquid raced towards her, the Tokujo extended her arms and spun her body around. 8 trigrams palm's heavenly spin, she counted, and the expanding dome broke apart the stream, though some of the liquid still passed through the barrier, soaking her. Kabuto kept up the pressure, drawing back in some of the water she had deflected, and pulling more out of the air and ground. Hinata continued spinning the chakra around her, disrupting the power of the attack. Finally Kabuto quit, but he was already signing again. Doton, mud cephalopod jutsu, he slammed his palm into the ground. The mud created by his previous jutsu began to writhe towards Hinata, forming into the tentacles of a squid. Fireball jutsu, she quick spit flames onto the ground in front of her, evaporating the water and partially drying herself with the backlash heat. Kabuto's jutsu fell apart, no longer having the liquid to sustain itself. Hinata straightened, her uniform still clinging to her curvaceous body in places. Kabuto regarded her with a new look of respect, and an unhealthy dose of lust. Is this really the same girl who quaked in fear at Neji's words? He wondered, trying to tell himself that he wasn't worried. Then Hinata's eyes widened, and her head shifted so that she was looking past him. She charged forward, but her course wouldn't take her anywhere near him. Sakura. Hinata cried out in fear, and then bit her thumb, spreading the blood to each fingertip. The pale kunoichi stopped just short of the Shishinjin, and slammed her palm into the ground. Summoning jutsu. She incanted, and Sol and Lune appeared on the far side of the barrier. Help Sakura, she ordered them quickly, before turning to face the approaching Kabuto. The two squirrels drew their kunai-shaped shortswords from under their sashes, and loped towards the closest human, an overweight shinobi with a mohawk. That was dangerous, he told her, turning your back on me to interfere with another fight. I never turn my back on anyone, she countered simply, and I had to help my teammate. Suten, water slice, he gestured downwards, and some of the remaining water became an extended blade around his right arm, cutting towards the young woman. She sidestepped easily, and also avoided the return strike. He is trying to kill me, Hinata noted, surprised Kabuto would disobey Orochimaru. Doton, stone claws jutsu, she countered, rocky talons erupting from the ground to grab at the renegade medic. For an instant, she appeared to have snared him. But then Kabuto vanished in a puff of smoke, and her jutsu was trapping a medium-sized chunk of granite. Her opponent appeared on the far side of the enclosure. He threw a pair of real scalpels at her, and she deflected them with ginmaki before racing towards him. Shadow clone jutsu, she proclaimed, and dropped her hand back for the clone. A mass of light blue chakra swirled above her palm, slowly taking shape. The duplicate woman's hands started darting in, adding purple lightning chakra to the mix. It's like Naruto did, when we fought over Tsunade, he recognized, the muscles in his chest clenching in memory of the pain, but not. It is different, stronger. I can't let her hit me with that. Raiten, Rasengan, Hinata intoned, as the clone disappeared. She thrust the sphere towards Kabuto, who began frantically signing. Ninja art, energy net jutsu, he called out with a hint of desperation. A new barrier of condensed chakra appeared between them, taking on the form of a web of crisscrossed lines of green lightning. Sparks showered both of them as green lightning and purple lightning clashed. As it was designed to do, the energy net pulled off bits of the chakra in the Rasengan, channeling them away. But Hinata's technique was more powerful, and though the orb of swirling lightning was weakened, it still tore through Kabuto's defense. Watching his end approach, Kabuto placed his hands together in the same gesture Hinata had used earlier. Shadow clone jutsu. The renegade shouted, and 7 copies appeared in the rapidly diminishing distance between himself and Naruto's fiancée. They threw themselves at her recklessly, grabbing for her arms and body to slow her down, or even just standing in the path of her upgraded version of the 4th Hokage's jutsu. She struck at the clones with her free hand, destroying the ones who tried to slow her. And the Raiten, Rasengan took care of the suicidal copies. But by the time she was done, the real Kabuto had escaped, moving behind her, and was preparing more scalpels. The solid surgical knives were easier and more stable for throwing than the chakra versions, if not as sharp, and he fired 4 of them at the team. Hinata dismissed the Rasengan, not wanting to waste energy charging him with it again. In the same move, she stopped his attacks with ginmaki again. But his projectiles were a distraction, as he readied his next technique. Kabuto sliced open his thumbs, spreading a line of blood down each of his forearms. He began to sign quickly, and then slammed both palms into the ground. As he did, Hinata suddenly understood why their cage was so much larger. Yakushi now stood on the one of the 2 heads of a giant snake. Though partially coiled, the reptile would have been just over 80 meters long if fully extended. Its left head lifted a little higher so it could look at humans standing on its right skull. Kabuto, The snake's two voices rumbled neutrally, and in unison. Kishi, the medic inclined his head slightly. Why am I summoned? The beast asked. I am tasked with capturing this young woman, Kabuto answered formally, and I request your assistance in incapacitating her. Are you having trouble with one little girl? The snake seemed amused. She is heir to one of the legendary dojutsu, the summoner answered, and there is much more to her than her appearance suggests. We shall see, the scaled behemoth agreed. He started to lean down towards Hinata, when something else drew their attention. Back off, jerks, a distinctly feminine voice ordered from outside the Shishinshin. Hinata felt the voice reminded her of hearing Naruto speak, and Kabuto and Kishi also turned to look. The woman who had shouted was standing between Naruto and four other figures. The kunoichi wore a tight, short dress-style shozaku, exhibiting her fine figure. She had white spandex shorts underneath to preserve her modesty. She had shimmering cyan hair hanging to the middle of her back, and though Hinata could not see the other woman's eyes, she knew what color they would be. She held a sword in her right hand, and assumed a defensive position in front of Naruto. We won't let you lay one finger on our son, another other figure agreed. Hinata's eyes went wide. Naruto's other defender had dark blonde hair, spiky on top and longer on the back and sides. He wore a long white coat, with a line of flames around the bottom. No way, Hinata gasped in amazement, is this true, Kabuto? Kishi rumbled. I have no idea, the scarred traitor answered. If it is that knowledge, the snake trailed off twice before returning his attention back to Hinata, that is for another time. Hinata saw the snake dart forward to swallow her, and she flash-stepped to the side. Quick and attentive, Kishi noted. She can see all around her with the Byakugan, Kabuto warned his ride. Of course, Kishi's unoccupied head nodded, I remember now. I was still somewhat distracted. Hinata dodged the next bite, growing worried. I doubt my gentle fist and 8 trigrams techniques, or even the Rasengan, would penetrate that reptile's armored scales. She considered her repertoire. The Odama Raten Rasengan is probably too slow, and if it missed I would have spent too much chakra to fight effectively. And even if I summon them, none of the ninja squirrels are large enough to fight a snake this size. She was knocked aside, as a tandem attack by the two heads limited her avoidance options, allowing the left head to brush her as it passed. Summoning, she thought, as she rolled back to her feet, I really shouldn't. But I can't think of any other options at this point. I just hope she will forgive me. She dove forward and to the side, evading the next attack while avoiding the deadly barrier. Hinata reached into her shozaku, and pulled out the medallion she now wore as a matter of course. It had been modified and embellished to hide its origins from those who might still seek it. She placed her fingers on the 5 points in the back, connecting to chakra sealed within. I'm sorry, but I'm in a pinch, she said aloud, will you help me? She heard the answer in her mind, and channeled a measure of additional chakra into the talisman to forge a path. There was a small explosion next to her, and a domesticated feline appeared, quite large for her breed. I think your squirrels might have been a better choice, Kabuto mocked her. Then his eyes widened when he noticed both of the cat's twin tails whipping back and forth angrily. It can't be, he stuttered. Ni, Hinata addressed the gentle demon through the amulet, I would never ask you to hurt a human, but how would you feel about playing with a snake? I used to love hunting garter snakes, before, the Bayou trailed off sadly, then did her best approximation of a human shrug and continued, but I haven't had much of a chance since I changed. It could be fun to try it again. Hinata felt the predator's instinct rising in the cat, and wondered if she had made a mistake in tempting the sealed demon. But then Ni looked up at her. I don't have to kill the snake, right? The tailed beast asked, unbidden, can I just pin it and bat its head until it passes out? You don't have to kill the snake, Hinata reassured the cat, but I should warn you that the barrier will burn anything it touches. I don't know what it will do to you, but it will kill the snake. I'll be careful. Hinata altered her chakra connection to the amulet, visualizing turning up a faucet in her mind. She unleashed 70% of the demon's sealed power. Nini's fur instantly went from blue-gray to cobalt blue, flickering with flames. The Bayou also began to grow quickly. After only half of a minute, she was almost back to full size. Between the giant reptile and the giant feline, the previously expansive box started to feel a little cramped. This must be a genjutsu, Kabuto yelled, but there was no certainty in his voice. He placed one hand on the constrictor's skull, and the other before his face, and incanted, release. The two tails did not change or vanish, and the cat started to stalk forwards. Kishi slithered back as far as he could, with a look of unconditional terror. Kabuto shared the snake's expression, and jumped off his summoned ally's head, as the feline tensed to pounce. He landed closer to Hinata than he had expected, and transferred his fear and anger to the younger woman. How are you doing this? Kabuto snarled anxiously. Is it those repulsive blank eyes, like how the Sharingan can control the 9 tails? Hinata looked mildly taken aback by the insult, but she recovered and shook her head. Then her eyes widened in surprise, and she ducked. Kabuto followed suit, barely in time, as the two-headed snake's tail whipped over them. Why should I tell you anything about the 2 tails? She countered as both recovered. All you need to know is that Madara made the mistake of sending her to attack me, and now she is mine. She kept her face fierce, hoping he was convinced. To help sell the bluff, and keep him from thinking about it too much, Hinata quickly formed a Rasengan in each hand, and charged him. He jumped backwards, briefly putting the snake's bulk between them. Hinata dropped the ninjutsu to try to vault over Kishi, but the constrictor slithered away, trying to escape the demon. Nieni sprang lightly over the humans, and as she landed caught the snake's right neck gently in her mouth, and forced it to the ground. If snakes could cry, Kishi would have been sobbing as the 2 tails lifted her left, front paw to strike his other head. So great was his alarm, that the summoned reptile failed to notice the demon's claws were retracted, and he was not getting burned. I'm sorry, Kabuto, the snake dropped his formal speech, but I'm just not equipped to fight one of the Bayu. You're on your own. With that Kishi reversed the summon, and disappeared with giant burst of smoke. That traitor, Kabuto's ironic rage was short-lived, as the 2 tails cat demon turned to face the 2 humans. The giant feline licked her lips, and Kabuto backed away, his mind racing down paths of action that always came to a dead end. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.